The field of neuroscience has been narrowing down to focus on just a few animal models. But the animal kingdom is so much bigger than just rats and mice and worms. This is Neuroscience Beyond the Mouse. In Season 1, I'll guide you through some of the amazing sensory systems that other animals possess, including taste, touch, smell, and even some stuff that the human body can't detect. Today we're going to talk about elephants. So I'm reading this study that was published in January 2022 called Trigeminal, Ganglion, and Sensory Nerves Suggest Tactile Specialization of Elephants. And immediately it's one of those pictures say 1,000 words situations. Now, Figure 1b is a photograph that summarizes their entire interesting discovery. The authors dissected out one of the nerve bundles of the elephant's face, called the trigeminal nerve. Now, this nerve isn't just an elephant thing. Us humans have one too. Well, technically, we have two, one for each half of our face. It's one of the 12 cranial nerves, the nerves that originate directly in the brain and send their projections out from the ventral surface of the brain. The trigeminal nerve is sometimes called cranial nerve 5. Now, this elephant trigeminal nerve is huge. Specifically, the branch of the nerve that communicates with one of the most distinctive features of the elephant, its trunk. Now, the immediate question I had was, how is it even possible in the year 2022 to do any kind of experimentation on an elephant? I understand that back in the day, before our animal protection agencies were all federally mandated and put into place, maybe then you could get away with some experimentation like this. Google Autocomplete tells us the most searched query about elephants is, are elephants endangered? And just to save you time, the answer is yes, they are very much endangered. Especially Asian elephants, like Burma, the subject whose trigeminal nerve we see laid out on the dissecting table in Figure 1b. So actually, most of the reasons why elephants are endangered is because of humanity's footprint, right? Ranging from stuff like hunting and deforestation. And repopulating Asian elephants is actually a huge challenge, even in the most controlled settings. And the reason why is that elephants have notoriously long gestation periods. They can be pregnant for up to 22 months, and even then, they just give birth to one single elephant child. Nearly 2 years of being pregnant, and all you get is one elephant? And now you can compare that with the mouse. A mouse is sexually mature in just around a month. And when they give birth to litters of maybe 5 or so pups every 3 weeks. And this is actually one of the reasons why mice are used in non-human research. It's relatively easy to fill up a whole colony full of mice. And the second reason is how easy it is to house mice. You can put 5 of them in a little space a little bit larger than a shoebox. An elephant, on the other hand, even a newborn, weighs around 200 pounds. Or if you really want to impress the scientists, that's about 100 kilograms. Now to get back to the question of how do they get access to the elephant, well, the answer is a little bit sad. The research team has an active partnership with the Augsburg Zoo in Germany. I imagine the most difficult decision that has to be made at a zoo is when an animal needs to be put down for euthanasia. Sometimes, in the case of Burma, our 52-year-old Asian elephant, the animals just have health complications that make their life very painful. And that final judgment call is not easily made. But when it does happen, this is when the research team is able to come in and do their dissection. So, brief primer on neuroanatomy, at least in the context of the trigeminal nerve. Conveniently, the name actually gives us a lot of information about the way it's organized. There are 3 branches, which explains the tri, and there's 2 of them, one for each half of our face. Kind of like the twins of Gemini. The trigeminal nerve contains both sensory nerves, which come into the brain, and motor nerves, which leave the brain. The sensory component is important for detecting things, such as feeling on our face, while the motor component is important for controlling our muscles, such as the ones that make me do this. Each of the 3 branches has a name. The one responsible for communicating with the forehead and the upper part of the face is called the ophthalmic branch. And the one that's responsible for communicating with the bottom part of the face is called the mandibular branch. And the one right in the middle is called the maxillary branch. And this is the one, at least in humans, is responsible for this section of the face. As you might guess, this section is also analogous to the elephant's trunk. Extending off of the maxillary branch is a nerve called the infraorbital nerve, and this is the nerve that actually runs all the way down the length of their trunk. So the coolest comparison in the whole paper is shown in the first figure. Not only did they dissect out the trigeminal ganglia, but they also put it side by side next to a cross-section of the spinal cord. The spinal cord carries motor and sensory information both to and from the brain, but it communicates predominantly with the rest of the body. When the human spinal cord gets injured, like when Christopher Reeve fell off a horse several years ago, a person can end up paralyzed, since motor signals from the brain are unable to make their way down to the rest of the body. You may also lose the ability to feel sensations on your skin, since the sensory information is unable to go up into the brain. It's at this point where I made this incorrect assumption that the spinal cord would need to be huge to carry all that information from the elephant's giant body. But when you look at the diameter of Burma's spinal cord, next to the maxillary branch of his trigeminal ganglia, you'd be shocked to see that one maxillary branch is nearly the same diameter as the entire spinal cord. The implication there being that the trunk needs to carry just as much sensory and motor information as their entire body. So yeah, you find the maxillary branch to be huge, that makes sense. Elephants are huge too, right? So in order to control for this, they dissected out other important nerve components. Now this really neat anatomical finding makes a lot of sense once you start watching some elephant behavior videos. They use their trunk in the same way that humans use our hands, for carrying small objects, for moving things from place to place, and for reaching for tall fruits in the trees. The difference here is that even though human hands are pretty well articulated and can do some really neat things, the elephant trunk has almost 40,000 different muscles, which is more than we have in our entire body. Each of those muscles needs to get the correct information from the brain in order for it to do what it's wanting to do. And given that so much information needs to travel down the trunk to control those complex muscles, it makes a lot of sense that the maxillary branch is so huge. Secondly, these animals also use it to probe around their environment. They interact with their surroundings just like we would in a dark room, trying to feel around for what's there. In this way, elephants use their trunk almost like a sense organ, detecting their surroundings. And all that sensory information, just as you guessed, has to go into the brain somehow. This is a great opportunity for me to just casually drop the word elephantunculus and see if it sticks. And here's a random fun fact I learned while reading this paper. It turns out a female elephant is also called a cow, which is confusing because a cow is also called a cow. So yeah, I got confused quite a bit. The researchers speculate that elephants really care about tactile information that they collect with their trunks, and have evolved such large trigeminal nerves in order to convey that information into their brains. And although there's a lot more work to be done, there's all kinds of practical and ethical reasons for why further research in elephants is likely to be slow. Okay, thank you so much for joining me here today on Neuroscience Beyond the Mouse. I hope you learned something today, and I hope I've inspired you to keep learning more about our brains.